We're going to continue our study of literacy with the science of reading. We're going to also look at digital literacy and some technology tools in this module. So this module is all about how the study and the science of reading is ever evolving and ever changing, and it's something that we want to keep up with as we support our students. All right, let's quickly review our objectives and essential learning. So the students will learn about the basics of the science of reading, including the reading brain, the simple view of reading, and Scarborough's reading rope. And we're going to look at how reading changes our brains. Then students will identify digital literacy and study effective strategies to improve student outcomes. And then lastly, we're going to study 5 technology tools, and you're actually going to study more than that because that's going to be the activity that you do this module. And these technology tools are used to enhance literacy instruction. Of course, you're going to see that they're just great for overall effective instruction, but they're particularly helpful for what we know as literacy, which is reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Our essential questions for this module are: how can teachers improve learner literacy engagement and outcomes by implementing neuroscience? And how can teachers use technology to enhance students in digital literacy and support students' reading outcomes? Okay, so if you are engaging with this at home or online in the online format, I'm going to go ahead and instruct it as if you were in person. And the reason for that is I want you to get to see what some of these effective strategies are, so that when you are in the field, you can immediately identify them. Or when you are developing your own lessons and putting them into practice, you can have a model of what that was like. So for example, for this particular aspect of the lesson plan, we would do a 4 corners activity. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through it, and then I'll talk about what the outcomes would be. So I want you to examine the literacy skills graphic at right. Then I want you to consider your own literacy strengths and weaknesses. At this point, if you were in a classroom, I would instruct you to physically get up and go to the corner that is labeled with your particular literacy strength. You would move to that place, and then at that point, hopefully you would have some conversation partners. If not, if there's always just one person in a corner, I typically would go over and engage with them in the conversation. And then if we needed that grouping for some other kind of activity, I would simply put that single student with the smallest group to kind of keep the groups balanced. So at this point though, you would have a conversation. You would give them time, put a timer up on the board, and the time would depend on how many students are in your class. And you would ask them to have a conversation with their corner mates about this literacy strength. How does it benefit them in school? How does it benefit them in life? What contributed to its development? Notice how when they're able to engage in this discussion technique, they're going to be more engaged. We're allowing them to physically get involved in it by moving to the corner, and so those kinesthetic learners are going to be engaged. And then they typically are going to be more interested in hearing their peers speak than they would hearing me speak. And so this would be a 4-corner activity. Notice that what we're doing with this is we're actually reviewing what the 4 modalities are of literacy, the 4 main: speaking, writing, reading, listening. It's worth noting that in recent publications, I have noticed a 5th one. It's called viewing. And we know that that would make sense from last module where we talked about visual literacy. Notice that I would then give students an opportunity to do the same thing, but this time with their weakness. And I think what you're going to see with this is it's kind of interesting because many times it's the same students. So for example, the same students who consider themselves to be strong in writing may consider themselves to be weak in listening and things like that. So again, if we were in person, you would be playing this game, but since you're doing it online, I simply want you to reflect yourself. So we would continue playing four corners. For the next part of this game, I would want them to reflect on how their own literacy experiences and then report to the correlating corner. So when reading print text, so just regular traditional text, I prefer to read, and I've given them 1, 2, 3, and then 4, notice, is kind of the catch-all, the something else. So nonfiction, such as biographies and histories, informational works such as magazines, newspapers, and topical works that focus on specific subjects. That would be corner 2. And then corner 3, of course, would be fiction. And so they would move. And then once they get into those corners, I would lead them in a discussion, and I would ask them to please have a conversation about why you prefer this text. So put a timer on the board and then give them a moment or two, depending on the grouping, to discuss why do you prefer this text? Why do you think it's the favorite? If your class time allowed, you could actually have each group have one spokesperson represent the findings for the group. And so notice by doing that, we not only are giving the students an opportunity to express some personal preference, again, to physically engage and then to have that discussion, but you also get to begin to see who the leaders are, because they will volunteer certain members of the group, or as we say, voluntold certain members of the group to be the spokespeople for the group. Sometimes it's not exactly who you think. So that's kind of an interesting way to get to know your students and the dynamics of your class better. Again, if we were in person, you would continue playing this game. And so now we're reflecting on the ladder of reading. And so slowly what we've been doing is we've been getting the students to reflect on their own reading experiences and their own reading preferences. The ladder of reading is a new graphic for us. And so now we're getting to the introduction of new material. So I would have them examine the graphic at right, and then you also examine it and give them a moment to digest it. And then what wonderings, surprises, or questions do you have? Think about your own reading experience and those of family members. Which category do you think fits best? And so notice that there are 4 categories. And I don't have a key here, but it would simply go in order. Number 1 would be that top 5% where learning to read seems effortless. Number 2 is that 35% learning to read is relatively easy with broad instruction. Number 3 is that 40 to 50% learning to read proficiently requires code-based, explicit, systematic, and sequential instruction. And then lastly, the 10 to 15%. And these typically have reading disabilities. They're going to require many, many repetitions. So a learning disability or a reading disability is often going to be in that 10 to 15%. And this is kind of interesting as well. And you're going to see the breakdown of how it falls out, or how something like this would fall out in your classroom. They're self-assessing. And then once they get in those corners, depending on how the groupings, we would give them an opportunity to have a conversation with their peers. So we are, once again, incorporating discussion, incorporating speaking and listening, and reviewing new material here. In this case, we would be reviewing material that we've covered the last 2 modules, and these are the pillars of reading. And so examine the graphic at right and consider your content area. Which of the pillars do you think you will spend the most instructional efforts on? And explain your reasoning. So phonemic awareness would be 1, phonics would be 2, or actually, I'm sorry, phonemic awareness and phonics would be corner 1. Vocab would be corner 2. Fluency would be corner 3. And comprehension would be corner 4. And what you're going to find is that in the secondary content areas, students are going to be pretty evenly divided between vocab and comprehension, which is correct. That's where we need to be falling out in the secondary areas. That doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to the other areas, but we are responsible for strengthening their vocabulary and comprehension. But all 5 of these play a key role in literacy proficiency. And that's what we're going to actually be talking about this module. So the format of this week's lesson is called chat chunks. So at this point, the students would not be playing four corners anymore. I would instruct them to go sit back in their desk or their seat, or if they have assigned groups, they would go back and sit with those assigned groups. If we were in person, you would partner up, or you would get with a small group. This could be done different ways in a class. So in my college classes, I typically allow students to kind of self-select. However, there are times where I assign them, especially when we're talking about different content areas. Sometimes it's important for them to be with people who are going to be teaching the same content. If you were in a class, you could either do this by ability grouping, so you could group based on a higher performing or proficient student with a lower performing student. You could do it by interest. So maybe you had taken an interest inventory in advance, and that was kind of guiding who had common interests or goals. Or you could do it by behavior grouping. Sometimes we want to make sure that those students are they like to chat. We want to spread those out, and we don't want to put them all in the same group. And so there are different ways that you could do grouping. For our purposes, you are going to be doing this online. So again, I'm just trying to expose you to some higher order instructional practices, but you will be doing this, of course, on your own. Unless you want to find a partner to do it with, they might enjoy it. So grab a friend or a spouse or a coworker and have them do these chat chunks with you. So today's material has been formatted into a series of brief videos that are separated by chats. I want you to be sitting with that small group, and you need to be able to view the board and have a natural conversation with each other. So if you have been able to solicit someone to come and help you or to be in a chat chunk with you, make sure that they can see the laptop, but that you can also have a conversation together. It is helpful for you to have access to some scratch paper at this point so that you can just record your thoughts as we go through the chat chunks. And at the end of each chat chunk, I want you to be prepared to share your group's discussion with the class. Based on time, we may share every single group, or we may simply share one or two groups, depending on how much time we have. But be prepared to share. All right, we're going to be warming up now. And so I want you to, you're going to be accessing the video, and you'll notice that on the right, the video is linked. It's also linked on your Moodle. So if it's not highlighted in the PowerPoint for you, especially if it's a video, it's not going to be highlighted for you. Simply go to Moodle, pause this video, go to Moodle and watch the video. It's called How Does the Reading Brain Work? As you're watching this brief video, I want you to consider these two questions. Try to remember as much as you can to explain the reading brain to a peer. So I want you to think about, it's a pretty complex video, it's pretty dense, but try to simply remember as much as you can about the reading brain. And what were some of your key takeaways from the video? So take a moment, pause this, go watch the video, and then come back. Probably what you found through the video is that reading is a very complex task that involves multiple parts of the brain. It's not something that comes naturally to us, and it's not something that is simply innate like other skills that we have. And so it is the reason why we have to spend so much time in the classroom teaching this skill, because we know that our students need to be proficient, and it's not something that they're automatically just going to be able to do without any assistance at all. So that should have been some of your key takeaways from it.
What are you saying? It sounds like something started.
All right, before we move on, let's take just a moment to debrief about the science of reading. The term science of reading actually refers to the research that reading experts, especially cognitive scientists, have conducted on how we learn to read. This body of knowledge, over 20 years in the making, has helped debunk older methods of reading instruction that were based on tradition and observation, but not on evidence. Reading instruction is a highly controversial topic in education with two main sides. There's the phonics approach. Based on the science of reading, the 2000 National Reading Panel report stated that students need explicit instruction in the essential components of reading. These are, and we just talked about those, phonological awareness, or phonemic awareness as we refer to it sometimes, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. The key differentiator between the science of reading approach and alternatives is phonics. The phonics approach teaches children to begin reading by manipulating the sounds in words or sounding out words. The other approach, and the one that has been losing favor the last few years, is called the balanced literacy approach. So the balanced literacy approach is a strategy that evolved from the earlier, what we call whole language approach. It assumed that children learn to read if they are given good books and taught cues and strategies to support their reading, such as looking at the pictures or using context. This method has been popular with many educators since they believe it builds a love of books and reading. Although balanced literacy programs now typically claim to incorporate some phonics, they usually do not align with the more sequential approaches of a phonics-based program. What's more, including some phonics is not only less effective, it's not effective at all, according to some experts. Hanford, one of the proponents of the balanced literacy approach, reports that balanced literacy strategies like 3-cueing are fundamentally at odds with teaching phonics. One negates the other. That's what makes the reading wars a war, is in these cases, there can only be one victor. For our purposes, it's simply necessary that you understand about these two different approaches. As a secondary teacher, you will not be teaching reading. And if you are receiving certification that's K through 12, you are probably going to be, you will probably not be explicitly teaching reading. You will probably be in a music, an art, or a PE class in which you will be assisting students as they are learning to read in another class. So that's something to keep in mind, but you do need to be aware of both approaches. So as you watch this video called The Simple View of Reading, I want you to keep these two questions in mind. What is the equation for reading? What are your thoughts on this idea? So watch the video and then reflect on your responses to these. Again, the videos are linked on Moodle. Our next chat is going to center around Scarborough's reading rope. So I want you to watch this video, and then I want you to consider these two questions. How has our course supported these strands of Scarborough's reading rope? And how can your specific content support students as they strengthen this rope? So take a moment, watch the video, and reflect on those two questions. Again, the video is linked on Moodle. Before we move on, I want to just take a moment to break down Scarborough's reading rope. So I've included this graphic so that you can see each strand, and notice that in parentheses it's going to have a little bit of a definition or an explanation for what that is. So notice that this top strand has to do with language comprehension, the background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning. This means inference and metaphor, and then literacy knowledge. So this has to do with the genres like we were talking about before, the different concepts that we have within our content areas. Notice that this top strand is built upon the foundational knowledge of what we call word recognition, which is the bottom strand. That's that phonological awareness or phonemic awareness. These are the syllables, the phonemes, the smallest units of sound, and of course how they blend. Decoding, this one has to do with the spelling. This one has to do with some of those alphabetic principles. And then of course sight recognition, or what we call sight words. So notice that this bottom one needs to become increasingly automatic. At the same time, we're also teaching them these more critical skills of language comprehension that also need to become increasingly automatic and strategic. So notice where to become a skilled reader, our students need to be fluid in executing and coordinating the word recognition and text comprehension. So it takes all of these small fibers woven into this rope to support strong reading proficiency. This is one of my favorite videos. It's called Reading Changes the Brain. So I want you to watch this brief video, and then, of course, if you were in class, you would have a little chat with your partner about the video. But since you're at home, you're going, or online, on the online format, you are going to be reflecting on these on your own. So number one, how can reading change our brains? And number two, what are the implications for how we teach and include literacy, given what you know about how the brain can change through reading? So let's talk about reading in the 21st century. Literacy today encompasses traditional and progressive skills, and it's important for us as teachers to be proficient at helping our students build both of these skills. Traditional, of course, includes regular practice with rigorous academic text that is accompanied by supportive scaffolding strategies. Progressive includes regular practice with digital literacy and fluency, teaching them how to critically read, write, speak, listen, and view in online environments and virtual situations. Today's texts are not just contained in textbooks or the school's library. Students have access to material from around the world. So it is no longer about what our students are interacting with, but it's us teaching them how to interact with them. We need to teach them how to intelligently navigate and construct meaning from a wide range of global texts. This leads us to our next chat chunk. So this video is called Digital Literacy, and I want you to reflect on, what does it mean to be digitally literate? How will you support your students as they build digital literacy skills? This activity allows us to look at technology tools that are specific to literacy enhancement. So new literacy technology tools are developed at a rapid speed. By the time you get in the classroom, there will be even more tools that perform better. In fact, and I know this seems far-fetched for some of you, you may even invent one. Many teachers are actually inventors of some of these softwares and applications. So the goal of this activity is for you to explore today's literacy technology tools and build your resourcefulness to meet your future students' needs. If you were in the class, this would be the perfect partner activity. So keep that in mind as you develop instructional practice. However, since you're going to be an online student, you're going to be doing this by yourself. But don't worry, a discussion board has been placed on Moodle for you so that you can share your learning and still benefit from the collaboration with peers. So it's linked, this discussion board is linked on Moodle, and you're going to develop a post that does the following. So for the subject of your post, the title that you put in, please actually put which technology tool you're going to be researching and sharing with us. The next thing that you want to do is, within the discussion board itself, you can number these. So the first would be, of course, once again, what is your technology tool? The second would explain what the tool is and how it works to support literacy and student learning. So do that in a couple of sentences, a few sentences. Number three, I want you to give an example or two, if possible, for how the tool helps. You can screenshot it if you need to, and you can actually upload it by attaching it to your discussion board. Remember, you just hit advanced and that attachment option is going to be visible for you. You're going to copy and paste it into the discussion board, or you can actually type it out and put it into your own words. I need you to provide then 2 examples of how this technology tool could be used in secondary content areas. Of course, ideally, I would like you to select your own, so whatever content area you plan to teach in, but then also select a different content area. Then once everything is posted, you're going to read your peers' post and comment on 2 of them with substantive comments. You can also use this in your portfolio, which we're going to be doing in lieu of a final exam. We do a portfolio, and you can actually include some of these in the portfolio. So let's reflect on our learning for this module. I'd like, if we were in person, this would be the perfect place to engage in a closing class discussion. So I want you to be thinking about, what is one example from today's lesson about how science, technology, and literacy are all related in the way that we support learners? What is one new thing you learned from today's lesson? Never stop learning about how our students learn and working to master your instructional craft, as the science of reading and learning teaches us more about how our students access, process, and comprehend text and information, we will better meet their needs. Also, we must broaden our use of technology to help our students learn and support them as they navigate traditional and digital literacy. I hope you've enjoyed this unit and I hope you've learned a lot. Remember, all materials are also on Moodle. Have a great week and reach out if you have any questions.